Hello, my name is Rachel Litton. I'm a marketing specialist here at EDB, and I'll be your host for today for our webinar, No Time to Waste, Migrate from Oracle to Postgres in Minutes. I am joined by Marc Linster, Senior Vice President of Product Development here at Enterprise DB. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. This presentation will be recorded. We will be sharing this recording along with the slides so you can pass them along to any colleagues who can make this session. The lines are currently muted. We will be answering questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to submit a question if you have one. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we will try to answer them offline via email. We are scheduled for 1 hour. We expect the presentation to last about 50 minutes with about 10 minutes for Q&A. And now, without further ado, here is Marc Linster.
All right, thanks, Rachel. So what we're going to do today is I'll take you through some practical experience for how to migrate from Oracle to Postgres, and then we'll conclude with a completely interactive live demo of the Postgres migration portal that is available to everybody who has joined this webinar, and I'll walk you step by step exactly through the steps that you would need to do a successful migration of a simple but pretty standard Oracle example. So without further ado, I'll start here. First, the key takeaways. What I want you to understand at the end of the day is, 50% of migrations are really easy. Another 20% can be done without too much work. I'm not talking about months and months of work, right? I'm talking about a couple of weeks worth of work. The key is, how do I identify those migrations that are easy, so they can know where to start and how to be successful early on, and then maybe tackle the harder ones a little bit later. Then, why is an Oracle compatible version of Postgres, and especially the Postgres drivers and the tools, so important? And then key for me, a big learning for EDB and also our customers is, it's not just about the database. There's a lot more stuff that you need to keep in mind when you look at these migrations in order to make a migration successful, right? In order to really replace a business system. And then, as I said, we'll go through step by step. How do I go about it? How do I actually do this? Okay. So I'll start with a quick overview of EDB. I promise I won't spend more than just a couple of minutes with that. Then we talk about why people want to migrate. That's important because you need to understand what the target is and why you're undertaking this project, so you can shape it in such a way that it's overall a successful project. We've seen too many people that have migrated Oracle databases and then found out that, they didn't think about everything. Yeah, and they now had a migrated database, but it never got deployed because there were other considerations, let's say operations requirements, compliance requirements, application interface requirements, management requirements that they just had not considered. So we'll talk a little bit about what it really takes to make this a successful migration. What does EDB bring to the table to do that? And then really important is pick your battles, right? Often we see people struggle with like the most difficult possible system that they picked, the most difficult, the most involved database, and they really get stuck. Whereas there were 20, 30 other easier targets that if they had picked them first, they would actually have made a difference. They would have learned a whole lot. They would have motivated the organization, and finally tackle a really difficult one. Then we'll go into a demo and talk a little bit about next steps. So just quickly about Enterprise DB, we are really the enterprise Postgres company. That's what we do. We take the best open source relational database, and we're convinced of that is Postgres, and we're adding the things that the enterprise needs in terms of high availability, in terms of support, manageability, integration with, let's say, Oracle or SQL Server, but then also the migration capability, so you can actually get there, right? It's not just for new apps, but you can take an existing application or an existing business process or an existing operational process like SQL loader specifications or so, and apply them to this new environment. So our job is really to take what we believe is the best open source relational database and provide everything that the enterprise needs to take advantage of this relational database. Now, one thing you need to know about Postgres and Enterprise DB. Postgres, or Enterprise DB Postgres, is the only open source based relational database system that's been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for 5 years in a row. Now that's an important achievement because it really says that in terms of ability to execute and completeness of vision, Postgres and Enterprise DB can actually meet the enterprise needs. There are a lot of other capabilities out there that you may want to consider, but you really have to make sure that this is not just a tool. This is actually something that you can deploy, that you can operate, that people can get trained on, where you have 7x24 support, where when you call in, you actually know that somebody's going to pick up the phone, and you actually know that somebody's going to get back to you. So if things go bump in the night, you're not stuck. Right, that's a really important thing that we at Enterprise DB have done, and that's why Gartner has recognized us in the Gartner Magic Quadrant now for 5 years in a row. But it's not just about Gartner and the commercial aspects. I would say that EDB is also the largest single contributor to the open source version of Postgres, right? And we take the open source version, we proudly contribute to it, and then we add some proprietary capabilities such as Oracle compatibility, management tools, resource manager, so you can govern, which process uses how many resources, etc. But in order to make all of this work, we are pushing Postgres forward every day. And here's the list of people who are, full-time team members of EDB and who are named contributors to the Postgres open source community or the PG admin community. Some of them, like Bruce Momsen and Dave Page, are members of the Postgres core team. That's a team of 5 that governs, how the whole Postgres community works. Others, like Andres Freund and Robert Haas, are code committers. Others, like Mithun and Jivan and Philippe, are known contributors or named contributors on the Postgres website. You may use Postgres in many other incarnations. You may download an RPM from postgresql.org. Well, it's actually Devrim Gunduz who makes most of those. So what's really important in this, and that's the key takeaway here, is that while Enterprise DB focuses on making Postgres accessible to the enterprise so the enterprise can take advantage of it, we're not just looking at the commercial side of it. We are a very dedicated supporter to Postgres as an open source database. And when we talk about making Postgres accessible to the enterprise, that is really important. Because if things would ever go wrong, and Postgres is a very stable system, so not a lot of things go wrong. If things would ever go wrong and you call our support center, they are just a few phone calls away from the people who've actually written the underlying database engine, who worked on parallelism, on partitioning, on just-in-time compilation, etc. And that's a very important thing that our enterprise customers need in order to mitigate the risk of deploying any kind of software. So talk about the EDB Postgres platform. Obviously, we have EDB Postgres Advanced Server, the Oracle compatible version of Postgres, and I'll spend more time talking about why that's important in the context of an Oracle migration. But we also support many customers on PostgreSQL, the open source version of Postgres. We've surrounded this with tools for integration, migration, and management. Why are these important? Well, Postgres in the enterprise is not standalone. Postgres needs to live in the context of existing systems. And these systems run on Oracle, on SQL Server, on other environments. So you got to be able to move data back and forth. Otherwise, it's an island solution and it doesn't have a whole lot of business value. Migration is important because you want to free up money. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, why it's important to truly understand the economic aspects so that you can be economically successful, not just get onto a new software package. And then management. You may wonder, okay, why is management important? I have a Postgres database, it works well. Well, that's a really good concept as long as you have one Postgres database, or two, or three. You can manage those off the command line, it'll just work. If your Postgres deployment is successful, you'll go to 10 databases, 20 databases, 100 databases. At that point in time, you will need dashboards, you will need exception-based management, because at the end of the day, if you want to be successful, you want to be the first one to know that a problem is looming, not because the phone is ringing and the boss is calling and saying, hey, the system is down. So you may not need it on day one, but if you're truly successful, you will need it. So the tool suites are important to make Postgres work in the enterprise. Lots of deployment options. Won't spend much time about them, but we all talk about containers, about virtualization, etc. All that needs to be covered. And then 24/7 support. You need somebody who's going to pick up the phone, because even though Postgres just kind of runs and runs and runs, every once in a while something may go wrong, or you may have a question as to how do I do this? How do I do point-in-time recovery, etc.? And so you need somebody that you can call, and somebody's going to get back to you. So really, that's the EDB Postgres platform. And with that, I've talked enough about EDB. If you got more questions, we can take that up afterwards in the Q&A. So let's first start with the why migrate. Some of those things may sound obvious to you, but I want to share some lessons learned here with you around the economic reasons. What you get out of it beyond saving money. And then, which excites me most, is the innovation that you bring to the table. So let me first talk about the economics a little bit. This is out of a study from IDC that they published in 2016. And a lot of these are probably pretty obvious to you. By the time you're at this webinar, you already looked at Postgres, you probably know how much Oracle costs, and you're saying, hey, I really want to change the game here. I want to free up some money. Well, one of the things you really need to keep in mind when you do this, when you want to get your operating cost lower, is you need to look at your Oracle contracts. Not just from a contract perspective, but what you need to do is you need to make sure that when you migrate a solution, you can actually free up some cores, give back some money, stop paying some support, move the money somewhere else. So in the context here, it's important to understand that part, because otherwise you will migrate. Migration costs a little bit of money, costs a little bit of effort, so you'll do good work, but you will not necessarily free up money if you don't understand can I actually stop paying the Oracle bill for certain of my cores? But the payback is really significant. And the payback numbers in here are not for going to free Postgres. This is actually the payback when you go to commercially supported Postgres. So where you have a 24/7 support, where you have the tools, where you do have high availability, where you know that you have a proven solution for 4 or even 5 nines. So it's pretty appealing from an economic point of view. But there is another part that you shouldn't forget, is when you go with Postgres or EDB Postgres, is it gives you the same Postgres everywhere. And that's a really important thing, because when you go to other solutions, you get a database that is licensed to run in certain virtualization environments, and you can't move it to the cloud. So you're really hampered in how you can deploy. Or you may go to a proprietary Postgres, let's say with one of the large cloud providers, but you're stuck with them because you lost your flexibility. And we believe it's extremely important that you're in charge of your own fate. So that if you decide that, yeah, I really like Amazon, but it got to be really expensive, and it makes more economic sense for me to go rack and stack and put some stuff into my data center and run it there. You want to be able to do that. So the same Postgres everywhere is really important. You want to be able to say that, yeah, I like OpenShift, I want containerization, I want to do DevOps, and you want to be able to use your Postgres, your data, your databases, your stored procedures. You want to be able to move that wherever you want to have it. So it's important that when you think about migration, that you actually migrate to a platform that doesn't constrain you, that gives you the flexibility to deploy on bare metal, virtualized environments, container deployments, and public cloud deployments. So keep that in mind when you think about what to migrate and where to migrate to. Don't go from a constrained platform to another constrained platform. So, and then the part that really excites me about Postgres, and I'm a geek, right? So, is that Postgres is really the Swiss Army knife for the DBA or for the developer. It has a really vibrant community, moves really fast. I mean, other databases have a new major release every couple of years. Postgres has a new major release with lots of new features every year. Now, for some that may say, oh, wow, I got to do a new major upgrade every year. Yeah, that's the price of progress. But you get new features, new capabilities on an annual basis through a very vibrant open source community that's active globally. And the community that's investing a whole lot in communications events and getting new people on board, making Postgres more accessible. It's ACID compliant. Now, for some people that may sound like an old hat, but I tell you, knowing what the database does or doesn't do and exactly what your state is worth a whole lot in almost any kind of business system. And then the thing that you shouldn't forget, especially if you're a developer, is Postgres gives you true NoSQL, meaning not only SQL. It gives you SQL with JSON, so the document format that's built into the same transactional model, key value pair, and then PostGIS. Now you may say, well, what do I care about PostGIS? I'll tell you that almost every app today is going to be developed for mobile deployments. On mobile deployments, what you want to know is, where's my customer? Well, Postgres has that built right in. So in the mobile world, you can say, I know where my customer is. If they send me their geo coordinates, I can start doing geo coordinate math and GIS stuff right out of the box. I don't need to go buy another system. And then the coolest thing is you're going to exchange JSON documents with your mobile device. In Postgres, you can just transact those in the database. You don't need to do relational in the database and then transform it so you can ship it to a mobile device. No, you can just transact it. And that's pretty cool. Lots of data types. Again, it's the geek speaking, but in Postgres, you have an IPv4 data type, an IPv6 data type. Now, you could do the same thing with a string and then parse it and make sure it's right, etc. Or you could just use one of the many data types that Postgres offers to reduce the code. Same thing, if you're coming from, let's say, other spatial databases, look at PostGIS and you'll see that potentially your lines of code are really going to be diminished because the capabilities are quite significant. Things like foreign data wrappers to put Postgres at the heart of your data center, and then native streaming and native logical replication. And I'm telling you this, that it's native, because just like GIS and JSON-B built in, that means that you can start thinking about your architectures completely differently. So when you migrate, you don't just migrate to something that's cheaper, or as I said before, to something that can be deployed wherever you'd like it to be deployed. You migrate to a platform that gives you a lot more opportunity to do interesting stuff. You may take an old application, migrate it from Oracle onto Postgres, saves you a lot of money. But you are also now poised to take the next step and say, all right, I want to make this app geo-aware. I can do that. I want to make this app mobile-aware. I can do that. Okay? So when you think migration, don't just think, oh yeah, it's from A to B, and then I get to B and I'm done. No. B positions you to do a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Plus, the move from A to B took out a lot of cost that you can now use to actually do that interesting stuff, okay? But you have to make sure that when you move from A to B, you're actually freeing up money, right? That you're actually freeing up licenses, that you can actually cut the bill so that you can reinvest that money. That's why understanding the scope of migration and the purpose of migration is really important so that you get mileage out of doing this work. Okay, so what's involved in the migration? And here's a Gartner source. You can look at that. Gives you some idea where the effort is. Everybody always thinks about data and the data structures. Well, I'll show you in the demo that data and data structures are actually quite easy to do. And that's not where the hard part is. Yeah, there's a problem about, and I'll talk about that when I touch on downtime, about how to make sure that you can move large data sets without having multiple days of outage. But those are solvable problems. Code, queries, and stored procedures, they look easy. They're not. Okay? The devil is in the details, so migrating code is not that easy. And I'll talk to you about the EDB version of Postgres that has native Oracle compatibility built in, and it's focused on making the code migrations much, much easier, or in many cases even trivial. I'll show you that. And then the other part is the interfaces, the OCI, JDBC, Proceed, ODBC, .NET, etc. They're very hard because they touch your application. So if your application talked to your database and expected to call a stored procedure with, let's say, return parameters or in-out parameters, well, if you don't have the right interfaces that actually support exactly that, you'll have to go and touch your application. So it's not just migrating the database and creating similar functionality. The ripple effects through the stack are going to be significant. So data is easy, code looks easy, it's not, and that's really what the Gartner stat on the left side shows, where they say, hey, the first part of the logic, the first 80% are really easy, and that's usually true, and then come 20% that are really hard. We're saying by using Oracle compatible Postgres, that part actually gets a lot easier. And then the part that I want you to remember is management and compliance requirements. So there's a lot of operational aspects to running a database, as we all know. It's backup recovery, it's security, it's integration with the rest of the environment, it's, I don't know, SNMP integration, etc. Don't forget about these things. Don't forget about, I don't know, PCI compliance. It's not just about migrating the code. We have seen too many situations where people migrated the data and the code, and everything worked out okay, and they've been slogging through it, rewriting things, etc. And then they found out that they can't support the management procedures. And again, here, EDB offers things like incremental backup for Postgres. You can't have it with standard Postgres. With EDB Postgres, you know, we're about to release a new tool that does exactly that. So that basically you can meet the management and compliance requirements. Okay? So don't forget about that. Don't just focus on the data and the code. There is these operational requirements, and very often they're even harder. That's another reason why we've created a lot of tools that make Postgres work like Oracle in your data center. And then the last part is, don't forget about the downtime. Downtime doesn't play a big role if your database is, let's say, a couple of hundred gigs, because moving a couple of hundred gigs from Oracle to Postgres is quite easy and goes relatively fast. So you'll need maybe a couple of hours of downtime, and you know, those are usually possible. But if you get into larger systems like multiple terabytes, now migrating data in the snapshot can take days. In that case, you need a change data capture mechanism to make sure that during your migration, your target system, so the new Postgres database, gets continuously updated. If you forget about that, your downtime window will become so large that you will never have time to go from A to B. So that's one of the reasons why we created a replication server that replicates from Oracle to Postgres. So you can do a snapshot migration, verify that everything's working, you put the change data capture in place, you wait for the Postgres database to have caught up, and then you switch over the apps so your downtime is basically minutes instead of days. So these are the things that I want you to keep in mind when you think about migrations, that data and data structures are easy, code looks easy, but there's always about 20% in there that are really hard. So you may look at it and say, oh, I can rewrite all of that stuff. Well, our experience shows that it usually isn't as easy as it looks. And then keep in mind that you need to understand the management and compliance requirements, because otherwise your migration effort will have been for naught. So talk a little bit about what EDB brings to the table in this context. It's Oracle compatible Postgres, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more, but it basically means you can run stored procedures, Oracle specific data types, etc., all in the EDB Postgres. So that makes the hard part of the migration that we talked about before a lot easier, and in many cases it's actually just a click of a button. But then there's also a bunch of tools like how do you find the Oracle databases that are going to be easy, right? If you just start somewhere, you may be starting with a really hard one. If you have 100 databases that you want to migrate, our analysis, our experience shows that there's probably 20 in there that are going to be really hard. And the trick is to find the 50 out of the 100 that are easy, right? So you need to be able to assess those for migratability very, very quickly, choose your targets, and show some success, reduce some cost, get onto more flexible platforms, and do that before you start with the really hard things. That's why we created the migration portal. I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. It's accessible free, doesn't cost a cent, and you can just, try out which of your applications would be good migration targets. You need to move the data. That's why we have the migration toolkit. And then the CDC, change data capture. So that's why we have the replication server. And again, we know that because we've worked with a lot of customers with multi-terabyte systems that want to be migrated, and there's no way they can have a couple days of downtime. I talked about the application drivers. That's non-trivial because Oracle has made a lot of extensions to their JDBC drivers, to their ODBC drivers, their .NET driver, and then obviously they have the OCI interface where we have a compatible version of that called OCL, and we have ECPG Plus as a compatible version to Pro C. And then the management tools, right? I mean, in Oracle, you have Oracle Enterprise Manager. We provide the Postgres Enterprise Manager, and then high availability. Again, it's not just about migrating the code. It's making sure that at the end of the day, you can meet the operational requirements. I won't go through the details of the database compatibility for Oracle, but it's basically stored procedures, packages, functions, hints, all the PLSQL extensions that Oracle has created, a lot of the tools, the data types, etc. And then in Q4 of this year, we'll release the next version in line with Postgres 11, and that will support Pragma Autonomous Transaction. So we're continuously making this better, and imagine you trying to migrate a stored procedure that includes Pragma Autonomous Transaction and trying to figure out your own way to rewrite that in standard Postgres. There are ways to do it. They're not efficient at all. That's why we are going to release Pragma Autonomous Transaction in this context too. Okay, and we're going to make all this presentation available to you afterwards, so I'm not going to go through the detailed list. And also, all the Oracle compatible documentation is available on our website. Just click on it, download it, study it, and you'll see how far how far ahead you can get with using EDB Postgres. Okay, database drivers. We talked a lot about those because you can see that if an application, for example, assumes that that the database, that JDBC supports named parameters, well, if you don't have that, then you'll have to rewrite the app. So now the database migration becomes really a full stack rewrite thing, and is a lot more extensive and expensive and lengthy than it would have to be. That's why we created Oracle compatible database drivers. Okay, pick your battles. I said multiple times, 50% of migrations are easy. Here's a statistic that an independent group, the Tech Validate group, did by surveying our customers. And you can see that about 51% of customers say, hey, they didn't have to do any modifications, or it was just really, really slight. Then comes a section where they do some moderate work, which could be a week or two worth of work. And then there is a certain slice, I call it about 20%, that are difficult. The trick is find the 50% that are easy, because that's where you can save a lot of money. That's where you can create yourself a lot of headroom for innovation, and leave the other 20% that are really hard for the moment when you have a lot of experience, or for the moment when they are due for a tech refresh anyways. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what makes a good migration candidate. And again, here, this just experience values doesn't mean that if something doesn't fit this framework, it's automatically bad. It's just that when you look at, let's say, your 100 potential targets, here are some signs on the outside that are easily visible that allow you to say, hey, this is a pretty good starting point. I'm going to take this to the migration portal and validate that indeed I can do this. If the app is written, let's say, in Java, and it uses Hibernate, that's usually a pretty good sign. Doesn't mean that it always is, but it's a strong indicator that that is pretty standard and it's going to migrate easily. Look at the procedures, functions, etc. If they're written in PL SQL, that's a really good sign. If they're written in Java, which the Oracle Java uses Oracle proprietary packages, that's really a bad sign, because you can't migrate those Oracle proprietary packages from Oracle to Postgres, at least not without rewriting them. It's usually helpful if you have the ability to modify the source code, and if the app developers are still there. In about 50% of the cases, nothing is required in the application. That's what our experience shows, but it's nice if they're there and can participate in the functional verification. If somebody uses Rack for scalability, doesn't always mean that it's not gonna work, but you really have to look at it and say, can I get there, right? I mean, we've had some experiences where people used 2-socket machines, and then they used Rack for scalability. As part of the migration, they also moved to newer hardware with flash drives, and in that case, there was absolutely no problem to just migrate to Postgres and not use something like Rack. But that's something that that you need to keep an eye on to make sure that you can get the right performance. And then flashback. Flashback is something that, again, is an operational capability. A lot of DBAs use it. There's no equivalent in Postgres. So if flashback is something that is absolutely needed to operate the app, it may be a less good target. So after we looked at the good targets, what are, let's say, more difficult things, or moderately difficult things? Well, applications that use the OCI interface. We have the OCL interface, and it is to a large degree compatible with OCI, but OCI is a huge, big interface, and it can be quite complex to use it. Postgres provides PostGIS as a comparable to Oracle Spatial, but there's no straight migration. Rewrites are usually not that hard, but there is a rewrite involved. PostGIS, I think, gives you a great leg up. May be worth it, but again, it's something to keep in mind. The Oracle extensions for .NET and ODBC are a little more difficult to use, especially because Postgres is really something that is targeted towards, or in the majority, is deployed on a Linux platform. So interfacing with typical Windows drivers can be a bit more difficult. But again, it's not impossible. We have very good .NET and ODBC drivers that support many of the Oracle extensions, and you have a lot of customers who use those. When does it get difficult? Well, this is how you can suss out a difficult one. If it uses the Pro C interface. And that's not just because of the Pro C interface, it's also because it tends to be older. Right? The Pro C interface is something that was used quite frequently in Oracle 7 and 8. It's been replaced since then with stored procedures and PLSQL. So it tends to be an older app, and the question is, are the application developers still around, etc. There is an equivalent again in EDB Postgres called ECPG+. A lot of customers are using it. We see it a lot in the telecom industry, but those migrations tend to be more difficult. Transaction management inside PL SQL. We're going to come out now with Pragma Autonomous Transaction. That's the most frequent one that we see. But again, those are capabilities that are not as well supported in Postgres. And then stored procedures written in Java. Postgres has PL Java, but many of those stored procedures, when they're written in Java on an Oracle database, tend to use Oracle proprietary packages, which you cannot migrate. And then if there's a must-have for rack or flashback, and again, treat those carefully, because a lot of people say, I must have rack. In reality, it's just for DBA convenience, and with streaming replication, you can achieve similar results. Okay, so that was just an idea to give you a way to assess where to start. So now I'm going to switch over to a demo. Okay, so the demo is set up first. What I'm going to do is I want to walk you through a multi-step demo. It's going to look a little complicated, but I think it's pretty obvious how to use it. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the EDB migration portal. We're going to download a DDL extraction tool. It's written in clear text, so you can inspect it. We're going to run that against an Oracle database to extract the DDL, meaning the definition of the tables, the stored procedures, data types, views, indexes, etc. We're going to upload that Oracle schema definition to the migration portal. We're going to analyze it. We're going to download it to Postgres and run it to create the schema. And then the last step, we're actually going to move the data. As part of this demo, I'm going to use Toad on both sides. If you're an Oracle DBA, you're most likely have been exposed to Toad for Oracle. For the last couple of months, we've now also had Toad Edge for EDB Postgres. It's a new implementation of Toad. Looks a little different. It's from the same company. So I'm going to do that demo using Toad on both sides. Okay, now I hope that my virtual machine, sorry about that, my virtual machine has gone to sleep. Okay, so the EDB website. We're at the EDB website. The very first thing you would do in your lab is you would go to the download page, and from the EDB download page, you're going to go to the advanced downloads, and there you can download EDB Postgres. The latest version is 10.5. You can get it there as interactive installers or as RPMs for Linux or Windows. This install will also get you the migration toolkit. You get a fully functional limited use license for 60 days, okay, that you can use for trials, so you can do exactly what I will show you in this demo. Okay. So let me go back here, and we're now going to go to the EDB Postgres migration portal. I'm already logged in, so let me just log out here so I can show you that what that whole thing looks like. I'm going to log in, and as the very first thing, what I will do is under the Getting Started menu, I will download the EDB DDL extractor. Okay. Once I've downloaded it, in this case, what I will do is I will go to Toad here, and I would just open up this file, load it back in, and then I have the DDL extractor. As I said, the DDL extractor is written in full text. So that gives you, as a DBA, the opportunity to inspect it and make sure that you understand that we're not stealing anything, destroying anything. This requires a read-only access, and the read-only access and all the access requirements are very well documented in the DDL extractor guide. So once I've opened it up, here in Toad. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it in the SQL Plus mode. I'm going to say, one thing I forgot here. So what I'm going to do here, what I did is I'm actually going to use the Oracle HR database, so the standard sample. What I did is I added an error, or I added a table that we cannot migrate automatically, just to show you the error handling capabilities of the migration portal. Okay, so it's a standard environment, except here I added a table that uses a binary double data type, which is not supported in EDB Postgres, and I'll show you how the migration portal can help you fix that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this. I'm going to run it as in the SQL Plus view. Okay, I'm going to go to the HR schema. I'm going to download it locally, and it now digs through that HR schema, through all the synonyms, tables, etc., and it created for me, again, a clear text file here, this one. And again, you can open this, and you can see again it's just clear text. So before you upload the schema information to our portal, you can inspect it and make sure again that we didn't get any information that you don't want us to get. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the EDB migration portal. I'm going to create a project. My project name is going to be webinar. Okay. And this is a test. I'm going to create my project. I'm going to go assess something. And I'll say here, it's actually my HR schema. I'm going to upload that DDL that I just created. I'm going to run an assessment. What that assessment tells me now is that out of my 37 elements, so procedures, tables, etc., everything worked except for one table. So I'm going to dive into that table, and it is actually my error example that tells me here the type binary double does not exist. So I'm going to go into that, it gives me a little editor, and tells me here the type binary double does not exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my type binary double. I'm going to go to my knowledge base, and I'm going to say, hey, what do I do about binary double? For some reason, this thing doesn't like me. Try this again. So basically what it will tell me is that the binary double data type is not supported in EDB Postgres, and what I should replace it with is double precision. Okay? And I run the assessment again. Now tell me that I had success, and all my elements here have been migrated. Behind the scenes, what the engine does, I'll just show you here in, let's say, the employee sequence, is it does a lot of repairs. For example, here I use a repair handler that takes that takes this max value for the sequence and replaces it with the corresponding max value in Postgres. So there's a lot of repair handling that has been going on. So about 25 of these constructs have automatically been changed to actually work in EDB Postgres. What I'm doing now is I'm going to export my DDL. Okay, so I created my project webinar with a database HR. I'm going to export that. What I'm doing is I'm going to go to Toad Edge. I'm going to open this. I'm going to take my webinar. So, and now you can see here that I created a complete complete DDL that has all my sequences, my tables, and everything in it. It also documents all the repair actions that it automatically undertook, okay, to make this work. What I'm doing now is I'm just going to run this, and it's going to execute all these definitions. Now, refresh my schemas here. And now I have a schema called HR. That schema has all the table definitions in it. It has the stored procedures in it, etc. So now the last step that I'm going to undertake is I'm going to go and run the migration toolkit. All I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the migration toolkit to do a data-only migration and take it from HR to, in this case here, from HR in Oracle to HR in Postgres. We're going to run that migration. It's going to connect on both sides. It's pumping the data across. It told me it loaded 8 tables. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to look at, let's say, my job history table. Just going to open up the job history table. I'm going to look at the data, and here is all my job history data. I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to run a stored procedure, right? Because in this sample, you all know that if you use the sample, there are also stored procedures, such as a stored procedure that adds the job history. I'm just going to run that stored procedure here and add a little bit of additional job history for employee 102. Okay, that has run. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do a refresh, and I have this additional data element in here for 102. Now, adding a data element is not a secret, but what I showed you is that we successfully, without a lot of ado, migrated data definitions, types, views, stored procedures, and data, all of that in minutes. Now, HR sample is a small sample, but it's appropriate for a webinar, but it gives you also an idea for the scope of the capabilities that we now have when we do a migration from Oracle to Postgres using the EDB migration portal. And as I said, the EDB migration portal is open to everybody, and everybody can download and install a fully functional version of EDB Postgres for 60 days and figure out, okay, how good are the capabilities and can I actually do this? And when I do this, call EDB and we'll help you get this done. So let me go back to the demo setup here that I showed you before. So we went through all the steps of downloading the DDL extractor, we ran it, we uploaded the schema definition, we did the analysis, we changed that data type, we downloaded the converted schema, we created it in Oracle, and we moved the data. Okay, all of that are just standard tools that we make available. You will see that the migration of the data actually did not go via the portal. The reason for that is we don't want your data. We don't want to see your data, right? And you don't have to trust us with your data, because all of that process happens completely on premises. Okay, last thing is, do you go to the cloud? Well, frankly, we don't care, because for us, it's the same Postgres everywhere. You have the same Postgres that you can run on bare metal and virtualized environments in containers or on public clouds, on AWS, on Azure, on Alibaba. It doesn't matter. You can do your first migration and target AWS if that's convenient for you to set up an instance and give it a spin. And then if you say, wow, this is really good, you can move it into your virtualized environment if in the meantime the IT department has racked and stacked the right servers for you. For us, that doesn't really matter. I mean, don't get me wrong, we love cloud, but cloud doesn't have to be a unique target. For us, it's basically the same Postgres everywhere. So that's why this doesn't really matter whether you go to a container first for convenience purposes and then say, yeah, my development, my testing, all of that worked really nice on Kubernetes. I love it, but I can't really tune it as much as I want to. So let me do the production deployment on VMware. You can absolutely do that because it's the same Postgres everywhere. Okay, so next steps. Sign up for the free training. I mean, the free training at edb.com is good. I think it's very good. It's absolutely worth it. Get that free training. Make sure that that you spend the couple of hours to make sure that you're well grounded in how to use Postgres. Download the EDB Postgres Advanced Server. It comes with the migration toolkit. Try the migration portal, and if it all sounds like the right thing you want to do, get in touch. So now we have about 9 minutes left for questions. Please post your questions in the chat, and Rachel will walk us through them.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation, Marc. We do have a few questions today. The first is there any difference whether you migrate to on-premises or to Postgres on Amazon or Azure?
No, not with EDB Postgres. So obviously, if you go to RDS Postgres, that's a proprietary version of Postgres that only runs on AWS. So you can't move it to Alibaba or Azure or VMware, right? But if you go to EDB Postgres, it's the same. It's the same Postgres everywhere. There's no difference in functionality, no difference in the core code. It's just a difference in how it's packaged and deployed.
Great, thank you. The next question, with respect to keeping data in sync from Oracle to Postgres as part of cutover, how does CDC keep track of changes? Let us assume the date and timestamp attributes are not in tables in Oracle, though.
Okay, all right. So our current version of CDC, so EPRS 6, uses shadow tables and triggers to do that on the Oracle side. On the Postgres side, it does it based on the log. So in Oracle and SQL Server, we do that right now using triggers and shadow tables. So there's no need to look at date timestamps or do any kind of comparison like that. We add after update, after insert, after delete, etc., triggers to do this automatically. The changes are then spooled to a centralized server from which they are distributed. So it's a pub/sub model, but it uses triggers right now. Future versions will also include log-based replication from Oracle, but right now we only have log-based on the Postgres side.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we've got another one here. Is the migration portal and DDL extract tool new? I have been using the MTK to migrate to the DDL.
Okay. Yes, the migration portal is new. We launched it. We presented it for the first time at Postgres Vision in Boston in June, and officially made it available on August 8th. So it is quite new. It's very, very successful. We were getting tens of thousands of DDL constructs that we're parsing. So it's a very new capability. It works hand in glove with the MTK. So you would use the migration portal to assess and change and migrate your DDLs, so the data types, the stored procedures, etc. You download those, and then you use the MTK in data-only mode to push the data across.
Great, thank you. If I get stuck with a migration, how do I get help?
Call us. I mean, we have a global professional services department. They're going to be glad to help. Also on the migration portal, there is a way to access Postgres Rocks, our social media site. Ask questions there. We're glad to help. The migration portal is made better on a very frequent basis. Every couple of weeks, we push out new repair rules, new fixes, new changes. So the best thing would be work with us. Let us know where you get stuck so we can make the tools better and make your migrations easier.
Great, thank you. And just a couple more. Does EDB support packages, or are those converted to stored procedures in a migration?
No, they're not converted, and you do not want to have them converted. I know, and I'm not going to name them, that there are other big vendors out there that convert your packages to stored procedures or functions. You do not want to do that because packages are scope definitions. So anything that is variables and no definitions of other stored procedures or functions that are defined in that scope, you will lose all of that. So in EDB Postgres, packages are packages, and they're native implementations of packages, and all the scope rules are being obeyed. So be careful there. It sounds simple, but it's not.
And we just have time for one more today. How do I know before the migration what are all of the things that could be difficult?
Okay, take a look at the slides. The key thing is really to understand that this is not just about the content of the database, but you also have to look at the application interfaces and the operational requirements. The application interfaces being the drivers, and then the operational requirements, meaning high availability, backup recovery, encryption, security, manageability, uptime requirements, etc. That sounds like a long list, but you know, any knowledgeable DBA will know that. And I think with EDB Postgres, we've been able to meet by the vast majority of those requirements. But we often see people who say, oh yeah, this is easy to do. And then they migrated it, let's say a couple terabyte database, and they said, yeah, but I can't back it up in my backup window. I don't have enough time to do it. Well, that's where some of the EDB tools are coming in to make backups faster. Okay? Or I can't monitor it. I can't tie it into my SNMP environment. Well, that's where our management tools are coming in. So think about the whole context before you dive into the code.
All right, thank you very much, Marc. I apologize for those questions that we were unable to get to today, but that is all of the time that we have. Thank you all for joining us for the webinar, and as I mentioned, we will be sharing this recording along with the slides with you shortly. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you very much, Marc.